Hey, everybody. My name is Ken. I'm the location pastor for Avon at Grace Church, and we're glad that you're on with us tonight. Chap, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Chap Bettis, and I'm the author of The Disciple Making Parent and some other resources for the family. I grew up in the South and came up to New England and planted and pastored a church for 25 years, and now I have a ministry to help parents. I've been married 32 years, almost 33, and I have 4 children in their 20s. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, we're going to wait for some more people to jump on. And as they jump on, we're going to ask you to say hi, let us know where you're watching from, and give us the age of your kids. So as you jump on, say hello to us. I'm going to be asking Chap just a couple of questions to get to know him, and we'll get started with our main topic in just a minute. So tell me some of the places that you've lived.
Let's see. Well, I grew up in Alabama. And came up here, Rhode Island, to go to college. And South Carolina for seminary. But is that it?
Okay.
Summer in Michigan, Bay City, Michigan. If you sort of think summer jobs or travel, those are different. But yeah, pretty simple things.
Where's your favorite place to visit?
Well, one of the fun parts of the ministry now is I get to travel, and I spoke last fall. My wife and I went to Nova Scotia.
Oh, never been there.
Sorry. Oh man, this is on tape. Sorry, Newfoundland. Sorry, Newfoundland. Don't get that wrong, man. I love those guys in Newfoundland, and I'd love to go to Nova Scotia, but Newfoundland, yeah, is just gorgeous and a great history. My wife and I had a opportunity many years ago now at this point to go to Norway. Again, gorgeous area. So.
Yeah, if you're jumping on again, we want to make sure you say hello. Let us know who you are and where you're watching from, and share the age of your kids, as we're going to be talking about parenting this evening. If money wasn't an object, where would you like to vacation this summer?
Oh my goodness. If money and COVID-19 wasn't an object?
Remove all barriers. Where would you like to go?
I should throw in on the previous question again. Speaking, my wife and I had the privilege to go to Hawaii. I would probably, I might go back there. I might go back to Israel.
Ooh.
That was a transformational experience. And then, I think I'd love probably to visit New Zealand and Australia. So yeah, so I've been privileged to go some places that check off my bucket list in a sense.
Okay. So I'm going to ask some silly questions. Are you a Coke or Pepsi guy?
No question, Coke. No question.
There you go. Okay. I was going to have to turn the camera off if you said Pepsi, so I'm glad you said Coke. Are you a pizza or a burger guy?
Oh man, both of those. Burger.
All the above. What is the nicest car you've ever driven?
Nicest car, automobile?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be yours, but yeah, nicest automobile.
Oh man, nice. Well, I can't think about that. So my philosophy, which has been a ministry philosophy, is to try and have decent cars, but after they are quite used. So my kids would tease me about the unnice cars I had, but the one before this was a Saab 930, and so I enjoyed driving that one.
Okay, if money and stigma were not attached to anything, what is your dream car?
Ah, man, that's hard. That's like asking me. That's hard. Yeah, probably BMW.
BMW.
Yeah.
I assume you're a reader since you're an author.
Yep.
Other than yourself, who are some of the authors that you read?
I met a goal this past year to reread all of C.S. Lewis's works, and didn't quite finish that, but enjoyed his science fiction and some of those other works. So I enjoy him, and that was good. I need to do more fiction, and so enjoyed his fiction work. Enjoy. I got a little age on me, so I've enjoyed. I go back and reread like J.I. Packer and John Stott.
Okay.
And more recently, guys like, of course, like John Piper and others. More recently, but
I'm going to ask our audience that now that we have people jumping on, what are some of your favorite books to read? Do you have a favorite book this summer that you're just dying to get into as you maybe go to the beach? Why don't you share that in the thread with us as we're getting ready to get started? Again, say hello. Let us know where you're watching from, and if you can let us know the ages of your kids, that just helps us, as in our discussion, to be able to know what age groups that parents that are watching. Which would you rather do? Would you rather go to the mountains, or would you rather go to the ocean? Are you a mountains guy or an ocean guy?
I really like the ocean. My wife's family is from Southern Rhode Island. I really find something just enjoyable about doing nothing, sort of sitting at the beach, just getting hot, going in the water, getting out. So in the South, the beaches, there's always these things to be concerned about, the animals or whatever. Up here, I don't mind the cool of the New England water.
We just got sharks, great white sharks. That's all we have to worry about.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'll do one last question, and then again, I'll have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself now that we have new people on.
Okay.
Know that you're a pastor. Know that you're an author. But if you had to choose another career, what would that be?
Oh man,
veer off into another.
I love teaching. So if I could be a professor without the the educational hoops you have to jump through, I might choose that. I love seeing the light bulbs go off. That's just one of the joy. I think every teacher knows that joy, where people come in, kids come in. Before I was a pastor, I taught school a couple of years, and the kids come in and you explain something a certain way, and you just see the light bulb go off. And so that's
I agree. I'd love to teach, as long as I had a teacher's aide that did all the grading. I wouldn't want to do the grading.
I was doing some grading. This has been a while ago, but I taught a course, and it was exactly that. As I'm grading some of the papers, I'm thinking, I really don't like this. Why did I agree to do this?
Right. Well, tonight we're getting started. And again, if you're just jumping on with us, please let us know who you are and where you're watching from, and the ages of your children. But tonight we're talking about parenting, and regardless of what's going on right now, being a parent is difficult. Not too many good manuals out there. I know growing up, my mom and dad would say there's no handbook on raising an ornery boy. And so it can be difficult. And but I think you throw in this quarantine and COVID, it adds another element to parenting. And parents have been cooped up with their kids now for 10, 12 weeks, homeschooling them, around them quite a bit. And just talking with parents, there's some frustrations, just stuff that they've not been used to. And so I'm glad that you're here. Give us a little bit about yourself, your family, your experience, and then we'll jump into the topic of parenting.
Yeah. Like I said before, my wife and I have been married 33 years. And I have 4 children, 2 years apart. So 29, 27, 25, 23, girl, boy. I was a pastor for 25 years. And then felt an internal call from God to start a ministry aimed at helping parents in many different ways. Some of the things we'll talk about tonight, some of them talking about directly related to the Christian faith. How do I pass that to them? So,
Mhm.
yeah, so do that full time now after 25 years of being a full-time pastor.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I know the topic that we're talking about is communications, parents communicating to their kids, which can be real difficult. And depending on how you were raised and what was modeled to you, there's probably an entire gamut out there of people who are watching how they experience that. And so why don't you go ahead and just jump into your first point on communication?
Yeah, well, so we've got a number of principles we can talk about tonight, and we'll go as far and as fast as you want to. But I think the first principle that we have to understand is that our words are powerful. So it's by the time we're adults, we're speaking, and it seems very easy, very easy to speak, but one of the wisdom books of the Bible, the book of Proverbs, says the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So my tongue and your tongue, our tongues have the power of life and death. There's another proverb there that says reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So if I realize my words are powerful, they can pierce, they can bring healing. They have the power of the death. I mean, think about a marriage relationship or other relationships. It's words that can build that relationship and words that can tear it down. So we just need. The first principle is to say, wow, these things that come out of my mouth are really important. And as a pastor, I've heard people's story. Some things parents have said just horrible things, and then I confess as a parent, sometimes in anger, having said things that were not helpful. But I think what I don't want to do is I don't want to excuse that. I want to say, wow, this is powerful, what comes out of my mouth. And so I think the first principle, that if I'll hang on to that and grab that and say, the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that's not true. That's not true. And so now as a parent, I may have more power than my child and a greater verbal ability. And so just the very first principle is just to grasp the power of our words.
Yeah, you mentioned sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt. I remember saying that, and as a kid, you believe that because you're either making fun of somebody or they're making fun of you. But as an adult, you realize that our words are very powerful. They can be very destructive, or they can be very, very encouraging. And growing up, I remember, my mom and dad are great godly people, and encouraged me quite a bit in pursuing the things that I wanted to do. But there were times, I think, out of frustration, they would say things that would hurt my feelings. And to this day, I still remember certain things that they said that I knew. Now I know there's no way they meant that, but just out of frustration, they said those things. And so we have to understand, yes, our words, especially as parents, people of authority, our kids look to us. Our words can be very, very powerful and shape their lives. And so, so my question is, how can we as parents make sure that our words are helpful and healing and instead of hurtful?
Yeah. Well, that gets into the second point, really, which is to think about wisdom. Because, okay, if my words are that powerful, then I want to make sure that I'm wise in my words. And this is just a sidebar. I don't know if you want to go back and talk about this later, but we never, as a parent, want to say anything that has to do negatively with identity. So our children may fail a class, or they may not make some sort of sports team. That's okay. They may have failed, but they are not a failure. And that's the identity. And again, I remember hearing just a story in our church that just broke my heart of a young woman whose father basically said, "You are a loser." That's an identity statement. And so those are so painful. But the second principle here is to think about communication wisdom. And as we're talking about healthy communication, that is a huge topic. That's a broad topic. And so, like, are we communicating with our spouse? Are we communicating with a 3-year-old, with a 13-year-old? And so I think part of it is realizing I want to grow in communication wisdom. I want to say what's appropriate and helpful in the moment. And one of the things that to think about is, if our children are young, and part of my parenting philosophy and part of what I teach is that one of the ways that we can understand parenting, I think biblical parenting, is authority and affection. So affection, our kids know that we love them and we speak words of affirmation, we speak words of encouragement. And also authority, that we're a God-given authority in their life. And so, but that plays out differently depending on the ages of our children. So for children who are young, we want to be, I would suggest, very direct. We want to give them very specific commands. We want to make sure that they're listening to us. We want to listen to them because we love them and we want them to feel affirmed, and we want to listen to what they say. And yet, part of what we also want to do is to train them to listen to us. In the Gospels, the Father says, "This is my son, listen to him." Sometimes we're not very good listeners. And so our children need to be trained to listen to us with their eyes, etc. But one of the things that happens is that changes over time. And the parent of a teenager needs to learn to communicate more with questions and less direct. And so, in some ways, I'm saddened when I see a parent of a 3-year-old asking way too many questions for the 3-year-old. And that's just as similar as seeing a parent of a teenager who's just as directive as they were with a 3-year-old. And so what happens for those teen years is we need to develop into asking good questions because we don't know what's going on in their heart. And often they don't know. I mean, the teenage years because they're so rough, they don't know what's going on in their heart. And part of the way we're asking questions is to draw out, what's going on in their hearts. And so that changes. It's almost like I would suggest, and I remember this catching me by surprise as a parent, thinking it's almost like my kids need 2 different types of parents. So when they're young, being very directive and making sure they're listening to me and attending to me, and I of course am listening to them and showing them affection. And yet later, as they become teenagers, my temptation is to be directive, and certainly there's still a time for that, but more asking questions. What did you learn from that? How? What would you do differently? What are you thinking? What's going on in your heart right now? How did that make you feel? All those different questions are needed much more in the teenagers. What do you think I should do next time you do this if they've misbehaved in some way? What do you think I should do about that now? Those are very different. I would never ask a 3-year-old those questions. And so part of it, growing in communication wisdom, is growing in who am I talking to?
So if you're on the webinar and you have questions, please type in your questions and we'll try to get to them. So I've noticed that most of the people on here have younger children. I think the oldest that I saw was 9. And I know you said the teen years, but there's that middle ground where they're not a teenager quite yet. It's that So when is that transition? What's the best way to help parents transition in asking questions? Where they ask more questions rather than being just directive. Is there an age that you recommend? What have you seen?
Well, I think I've seen that it grows over time, and I've used in the sort of my parenting principles, I've used the analogy of a funnel. So in the funnel, you give less control when they're young, And so, and that expands as they get older. So, I love my wife had a saying, you know, are you, would you like to walk up the stairs, or shall I carry you? Well, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is they're going up the stairs, as for a little child. And I just think that as a wise parent is tuned in, they're going to gradually more and more open up that funnel, and we're going to make mistakes. Certainly I opened it up too wide and had to bring it back. But I think more and more gradually giving them more freedom. So I'm not sure there's a magic age. I will say one thing that we did. So I think the 6 to 12 ages are obviously important. In our family, we called the 12 to 20-year-old the adult in training. And so for us, that marked a significant transition. So under 12, 11, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, we still were training towards obedience and asking them to trust us. So I'm not sure I really know a specific age, but I would say it's gradually you're opening up more and more freedom as they can handle it.
That's a good key right there. Is some kids are a little bit more mature. They may be the same age as another child, but just emotionally they might be a little bit more mature, and so parents might handle that a little bit differently. One of the things that you're talking about is listening. And I think that is a key component in communication, which most people, they think communication is just talking. But there's so much more. And you mentioned body language and tone. There's just so much that goes into that, that not only do we have to train our children to listen, but sometimes we have to train ourselves to listen so that we can parent them. How can parents grow in their communication?
Well, I think you've touched on one of those, and I think that this idea. So if as we talked about, if my words are powerful, and I need to be wise, and then also I need to realize this is an area I need to grow in. And so there's over talking and under talking. So some people, are over talking, and others don't talk. One of the complaints now among teens is their parents are always on their phone, so they're not listening. And so this idea of asking better questions. C.S. Lewis, who I mentioned before, he talks about you've never talked to an ordinary person, and I believe as a Christian, God has not just given you a baby, God has given you an eternal soul to shape and influence. So comparing to my TV or what's on with my phone and listening to what they have to say is vitally important. And I don't know if we can go in and talk about the next point as well, because that goes into listening. And this is right out of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But he talks about understand and then be understood. And this of course as our kids get older, but really understanding what is going on in their heart, and that's growing in becoming a better questioner. And one of those sins, I've done it, you've done it, which is a mind reader, the sin of mind reading, right? You're like, I know what you're thinking right now. Well, actually you don't. No one knows. God knows, but no, you and I don't know. And so being able to draw out a person, drawing out those questions. And again, we're talking as we're getting older here, 7, 8, 9 into the teen years. Certainly we want to listen to our younger children, but we also want to grow in our communication ability and asking good questions. One of the things social scientists, and this might be helpful really no matter who we're communicating but social scientists tell us that we communicate at different levels, 5 different levels. So the top level is cliche, hi, how are you? Great weather we're having. The next level is information, How was your day? When's that meeting, et cetera. But then the further you get down to the heart, you start to have opinions, you start to have feelings, you start to have transparency. And so one of the things we want to be doing as parents is asking questions to get down there. Again, Proverbs says the purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but a person of understanding draws them out. But also, our kids have those moments where they open up their heart, and to recognize that. So even our 3-year-old or 5-year-old, you're chatting at the information level, and then boom, they just ask a question that reveals things that are going on in their hearts. That should cause lights to go off and say, here, this is an important moment. My child is actually opening up the depths of their heart. And I have one woman I admire, and she talked about not getting distracted by the chores around the house. She says, the chores are catch-upable. That was her phrase, catch-upable. The chores are catch-upable, but when my child opens my heart, his heart, her heart, that's not catch-upable. And so taking time to have those discussions. And if I can put in a little plug here, one of the things that presumes to have that is time and margin. And so actually, for all the struggle, and I know this time period has been a struggle, for all the struggle, hopefully it's slowed down the sports, it's slowed down all the other things. And so now we actually have some time to catch up with our kids. One of the things I did with my kids to try and put margin in that time, to create margin to communicate, was to take them out on donut dates. And so on those donut dates, just ask them questions about how things were going on with them. So that this idea of how can I connect to the heart is really important.
Yeah, the date I've done with, I have 2 daughters. I've done that with my daughters. We usually go get ice cream instead of donuts, but it's a great time to be able to catch up. And depending on the age, like I know some high schoolers, when you start getting into high school, asking those deeper questions, you just get that look, like a deer in the headlights, and they want to keep the conversation more cliche, Yeah. So what are some good questions that parents can ask that maybe does dig down a little bit deeper to get past the cliches?
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, if you have a teen and you're just suddenly, trying to take them out for ice cream or trying to take them out for donuts, that's not going to work. And I think, and again, becoming skilled in asking those questions so that they trust you, but open-ended questions, not that, there are the prosecuting questions, such as, what were you thinking when you did so-and-so? When you ask that question, you're upset. Well, that you don't really want to know. You really want to prosecute them for wrong action. So some questions might be, what are some challenges you're facing these days? Or what's the best thing that happened today? What's the worst thing? Just open-ended questions. I think as our kids are older, we can ask, how can I pray for you? Just that question alone, and then really pray. But just that question alone allows them to share kind of as deeply as they, as they want to. So that's a great one as well. So, question, like if they'll saying something controversial that we would not agree with, so okay, instead of reacting, say, okay, what influenced you to think this way? And then one of the things when just this is just a basic one that's just really helpful when you're having perhaps a more intense conversation, is to say, do you feel like I've heard you? This is what I've heard you say. Have I understood you? Do you feel understood? So that's a great question. And then I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it later, but just when we're asking forgiveness, even just to say, help me understand, how do you think I've sinned against you? Have I, or how do you help me understand how I've hurt you? So all those questions, we're thinking the teenage years here, or the older years, we're asking and inviting, and we're still the authority, but we're more of a coach than maybe the authority we were with young children. And we're seeking to understand, we're seeking to coach them in life, and we're seeking to understand what's going on in their heart. When our kids are young, there's not a lot going on in their heart. So they grab their sister's toy. Well, why did they do that? Well, it's because they wanted the toy. It's like, why do you think I did that? I wanted the toy. It was just pretty brute force desire. Whereas when older kids are starting to have different motivations, and they don't always understand those motivations. And we can look at the same action, and there can be multiple reasons. So they could have done something because they were afraid of what other people will think. They could have done something because of some sort of fear, or they weren't thinking. Maybe they just weren't thinking in the moment. And all those, the same action can have multiple motivations. And as we grow in learning to ask good questions, having the space, then we can draw them out. And then even ultimately, we don't want our kids living in our basement, at 25, helping them learn lessons. What did you learn from that? What would you do differently? One of the dangers, I think, of the helicopter parenting that we're in is that our kids never learn to make mistakes. Well, we want them to learn we want them to make mistakes in our home, when we can coach them through that so that they'll learn their lessons. What did you learn from this? How much better to make those mistakes in our home than when they're out there. And that our kids are going to embarrass us. We just need to accept that. That's not a fault of our parenting necessarily. They're born, the Bible would say, they're born with a sinful heart. I say it this way, the Bible says they come messed up already. One of the fears of parents is, I'm going to mess up my kids. Well, biblically, they come messed up already. So when they do things that are embarrassing to us, rather than saying, my identity as a parent is messed up, if I was a good parent, they'd be a perfect child. No, that's not true at all. Instead, to see that as God has given me an opportunity here to walk through a mistake, and I'm so happy that they had this mistake while they're in my home, rather than when they were out.
Yeah, with parents cooped up, a lot of mistakes are being made. I know there are times where kids, they'll say something and then say, well, I didn't mean that, and out of anger or frustration or anxiety, they try to brush off like their words didn't mean anything. Can you speak to how can we help our kids to understand that their words are also powerful?
Yeah, well, it goes with modeling. We talked about before, modeling and saying, yeah, my words are powerful. I'm going to ask forgiveness when I lose my temper, because I certainly hurt you, and I want to take responsibility for that. And then also, as young people, we're training them. They're learning habits of interaction from their siblings, from us as parents. And so we can, even as we're gracious and understand their weakness and their children, we can also say, you need to, we speak kindly to each other. We're a family, all for one, one for all family. And we don't allow each other to speak that way. And I think that's something where, as a family, as a parent, there's multiple motivations. One is we want to have a unified family as much as we can. But also we realize that we're training them to develop habits. And so if they are if they, so think about their vertical relationship with us. And so when they talk back to us, that same sort of vertical relationship at say 8 that talks back to a parent. Well, now at 18, that's the same relationship, whether it's an authority in society or God. Same way with a child who's speaking to his siblings, at 8, well, he has those same horizontal relationships at 18 and 28. So we're training for that. And so just to cast a vision, to say, this is, we love each other. This is in our family. We speak kindly to each other. There's going to be consequences for not speaking kindly, and just so being convinced that this is important, and words matter, and having some consequences. I was just talking the past week with a friend in our church, and just he talked about growing up. His siblings would just yell at his parents and just say, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you," and then the next day, everything it'd be as if nothing happened, and that that had an effect. And so in that case, the parents, it was a single mom, she was struggling, and certainly that's understandable, and there's grace there. But given if she could have handled it, that would have been said, no, this is unacceptable. We're a family. It's all for one for all. And so we're going to speak kindly to each other. We don't speak like that.
I'm going to ask the parents that are in our chat, which emotion is the most difficult for you to talk to your children about? Is that anger? Is that anxiety? Is that fear? What areas or emotions, or maybe what emotions have you talked to your kids about recently dealing with the COVID? I know anger, is one of those, because again, we're cooped up. But I want to see what some of the parents, what are some of the emotions that they've been dealing with and trying to work through. I know one of your points is working towards or owning your angry words. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, and we'll see if any of the parents are able to chime in, or if they have a question about those types of words.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is so. Anger is just an issue with 90% of parents. So there are parents I've run into who say, yeah, I don't really struggle with that. And I believe them, but I much more the parents who say, yes, I get upset. And actually, I've just come out with some material, Parenting with Patience, Overcoming Anger, because I think it is such a big deal. And I don't think we understand it. Anger, we get angry when there's something that's important and wrong, that we assess as important and wrong. And sometimes we get that assessment wrong. But there are things that our children do or don't do that are important and are wrong. And so we certainly, we need to handle that. But the problem is that we attack each other with the anger. And I think we're gonna offer to email some people some handouts of the diagram in Parenting with Patience. It's so easy there's a problem, and then we're attacking each other. We're not attacking the problem, we're attacking each other. Instead, what we need to do is wrap our arms literally or figuratively around our child and say, we both are going to attack this problem. So having in our mind that the child is not the problem, the not doing the homework is the problem. That's the problem. Or the laziness, that's the problem. And we both are going to attack that. And one of the things, again, the Christian faith would say is that all of us are born with sin. And so if they're being lazy and not doing their homework, and being distracted, well, what adult has not been lazy and been distracted as well? And so we can identify with that and say, okay, we're going to attack this problem together. So the laziness, the talking back, whatever whatever that problem is. And so that, I think it's helpful to see that anger can be, quote unquote, a friend, but we've also, and this is what you were getting at, Kent, before, is that we've got to see that anger is a foe. And to Dr. Ed Welch said, to be angry is to destroy. And our words really, our words can be very destructive. And so, in fact, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, when he's taking the 10 Commandments and applying them to the heart, he said, "You've heard it said, don't murder, but I tell you that he who is angry with his brother will be in the danger of hell." So that's why, I mean, I would say we need a savior, is because certainly there have been angry words that have come out of my mouth. And so that's, so anger in the home is just a huge issue. And there's certainly help available.
We had two parents jump on, and they were sharing some of the emotions that their children are facing. One was anxiety, the other one was fear. But both parents indicated that their child has some sort of autism. What kind of advice would you give parents who are not only dealing with these emotions and all that, but then they have this special need on top of that, where their child has some type of learning disability?
Yeah, I really want to, and I'm not trying to punt here. That really is outside my expertise, and I know God will not give us more than we can handle, and I know that the children, parents of special needs children, really are. I mean, we're talking a lot today about unsung heroes, but those are the you're doing things that the rest of us don't see. I would give you, I mean, one encouragement I've seen. We have a good friend, and she ended up adopting 2 children, and one of whom had pretty severe Asperger's. I remember him. He was doing something. He was just stare at his shoes the whole time, and by God's grace, I mean, he's now professionally, he's a lawyer. And I mean, I know there were many nights of tears and prayer over him. So I would say, in terms of the whole special education, that is not. Sorry, I'm not read up on that.
No, that's fine. It just came up in the thread, and so I wanted to see if you had heard of anything.
Yeah.
One of the parents had asked that they have a difficulty with their child talking back to them. So how can they work with their child and them sassing back?
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that's some basic, that's training and figuring out what's an unpleasant consequence. And I've been actually this summer, I've been using sort of staying at home to work on, I call it parenting with confidence. It's the parenting 101 material, and figuring out, again, depending on the age of the child, talking with your spouse, assuming a traditional home, coming up with a consequence, and then I would say ramping it up in terms of training the child, and just to be able to say, Mom and Dad, we've let you talk back to us. That's not honoring to the Lord. That's not pleasing to the Lord. And so there are going to be some consequences. And so for a while here, I'm gonna warn you. You may not even realize you're doing it. You're just, at this point, it's just coming out of your mouth. So I'm gonna give you some warning, for a couple of days, and say, oh, that's an instance here where we're gonna have some consequences. And then start to implement it. And do you understand? Do you see how that was? I told you to pick up your toys, and you said no, or something like that. And then, okay, so that's one of those instances. And then once we know the child understands, moving to consequences. Having said that, though, depending on the age and depending on the heart of the child, if they're trainable, sometimes they don't know what they should do. And if you can make a game of it, especially of young children, is to say, is to make sure they understand the put on. So let's do this again. let's say the issue is when you give them a command, they don't do it, they run the other way. Okay, so pick a Sunday afternoon and say, okay, we're going to play a game, and I'm gonna say your name, James, come here, and when I do that, I want you to run into the room. So go in the other room, and then James, come here. And so they come in, and you go through the moon praising them. Go back in the other room. And so over and over again, and building muscle memory that when I hear my name, when I hear a command, I'm going to follow, I'm going to obey. So I think it's consequence, coming up with a corrective consequence that is somewhat uncomfortable for them. And that's where, as parents, we don't want to impose uncomfortable consequences. But it's talking with them. And then it's really, on our part, it's consistency. Children are gamblers. And so if they know that, every other time that they have something, do something, they're not going to get in trouble. They're going to keep doing it. One of the articles on my blog, I call it Parable of the Two Kind Policemen. I'm not a fiction writer at all, but if we put the effort into training our kids and realize, get up in the morning, think of it this way: policemen don't get upset when they're giving you a ticket. They got up in that morning, they knew they were going to hand out speeding tickets. They're not taking it personally. They expected people to speed. That's what people do. They speed, and the consequence is very clear. So it's the parenting paradox, I call, is when we expect our children to obey because God commands it, and we expect our children to disobey because they're sinful. So if I have that consequence clear, the negative consequence or the positive motivation, and I just say, yeah, we've allowed this, and we're going to work on this. And it's going to take effort. It's going to take consistency. Then I think you'll start to see some change.
I like that analogy that a police officer, when he gets up, he knows that he's going to come in contact with people that he's going to be writing tickets to, or giving warnings to, or even arresting, and he doesn't take it personal. In the thread, some of the parents are saying, yes, when my kid disobeys, I take it personal. So I'm glad that you shared that. It's we expect that it's part of parenting. And you mentioned that there needs to be consequences, and it needs to be appropriate, and it needs to be consistent. But can you speak to, because again, our children aren't perfect, we're not perfect, and we're going to make mistakes, whether we take it too personal or we step over those bounds. So as a parent, walk us through, what does it look like when we've overstepped? What are your suggestions for parents who've done that?
Well, so to me, in a family, we're always asking forgiveness. That's just forgiveness, just oils the family. So no one is perfect. That's the grace of God to us through Christ. And so there's going to be lots of times that we're asking forgiveness. And certainly we should train our children in that. So they should be asking forgiveness of each other, asking forgiveness of us, and certainly sorry is that doesn't really cut it. Certainly with little kids, sorry is enough. But Mom and Dad, please forgive me for yelling at you. Of course we forgive you. We love you. Horizontally, sibling to sibling. But then that also comes from us to be able to say, son, I yelled at you when I came in, and you didn't have your homework done. I yelled at you, and that was not. I certainly was not honoring to God. I was not. That was not right, and I certainly didn't act like an adult should. I'm the adult here, and so please forgive me. And the great thing about kids is they are so forgiving. So it's assuming it's not some sort of physical abuse or emotional abuse, just the normal day in and day out of sin that's in a family. The kids are very forgiving, and so that forgiveness oil should just be throughout. The gears of a family will grind down unless there's that gospel forgiveness. Just each one asking for forgiveness and granting forgiveness. And so that's, yeah. And then just the mechanics of forgiveness, instead of just, sorry if, there's just all these non-apology apologies, which is, if you thought I yelled, I'm sorry. Well, that's not an apology. The word sorry is the word sorrowed, and something I'm not really responsible for. So if you have a flat tire today, I'm sorry that happened. I didn't cause it to happen. I'm sorrowed with you. But asking forgiveness is when the other party, when I've somehow incurred a debt or hurt the other party, and they need to mark it forgiven, and that's actually a transaction on their part. And so just to have those interactions going back and forth all the time.
That's a great idea, because forgiveness does restore a relationship. I was at a conference this year, and one of the keynote speakers was Andy Stanley, and they were asking him about parenting, and they asked about discipline. Like, his kids are older now. Like, how did you discipline your kids? Did you do timeouts? Did you spank? Did you take away things? And he said, I would do some of those things. He goes, but more importantly, I would have them reconcile the relationship, the forgiveness. So like if they had done something to their mother, then they had to make it right to their mother. He says, you've got to take your allowance and take your mom on a date and make things right. If you did something to your sibling, you had to go and reconcile that. Even with their babysitter, you shared a story that they had to go out buy flowers for their babysitter because they were just a little terror that night, and they had to reconcile that. And so I love the idea that when we cross the line, we come in and we ask for forgiveness, because forgiveness reconciles that relationship. It repairs it rather than just saying you're sorry. And even from child to child. It's a healthy way of disciplining when they restore that relationship. A lot of good stuff that you've given to us tonight, and I want to give you just a moment. Some of our parents don't know that you are an author and have written several books. So how can the people that are on the webinar, how can they connect with you to get more of your information, to be able to connect with you and what you're doing?
Yeah. So the ministry is called the Apollos Project, and the Apollos, APOLLOS project.com, or probably the easiest way is just to email me, chap@chapbettis.com. And we had some, I'll be happy to send out some of the images from tonight. Happy to give away. Actually, I have an audio book of The Disciple Making Parent that I'll give away for free if people will email me. And then the study I mentioned before, Parenting with Patience, Overcoming Anger. I'm happy to give the videos away for that for free as well, just because we're in the launch period for that. So, but Chap Bettis, or they can go to theapollosproject.com or just Google my name and it'll come up. We've got a podcast. I do a podcast, starting up the YouTube channel. Send out a weekly email on a regular basis on the website. You can sign up for that, where it's just what I'm thinking about when it comes to parenting that week. So yeah, I know we live in a chaotic time. Can I say one more thing about back to your really burden for those moms who brought that up? One of the things in the parenting seminars I do, the pediatrician on my board, he says the emotion I see the most in parents is fear of messing my kids up, and so biblically they come messed up already. So that's not part of our identity. And so if we're relaxing, doing what the Bible says, trusting God, he's going to bless that, and it's not part of our identity. Certainly when they mess up. So that's just, they're going to. Every family's messy.
Yeah. Relationships are messy. Well, again, Chap, I want to thank you for being on tonight and sharing your heart and some of the things that you've worked through, have written about, sharing with us to help us be better parents. So again, I want to thank you for being on tonight.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. All right. Every Wednesday night, we have a different webinar for those that are on, and you can sign up. that'sgrace.org/webinar, and check out the next webinar this next Wednesday. All right. Thanks for being on tonight, and God bless. So I'm hoping that Brian now will take over. Again, I appreciate you being on. Several of the people in the thread said this was very helpful for them, and I hope they reach out to you. So appreciate you coming on. I'll email you tomorrow. We'll connect. And
okay, cool.
Right.
And why don't I send out some of those slides? Do you want me to send out some slides? I'll slightly modify them. Since people did not see them.
Okay.
Just so that they'll be self-explanatory to connect.
That'd be fantastic.
Super.
All right. Thanks so much. I guess you can just turn off your camera and
okay.
Exit out. All right.
Okay, great. Well, it's been good talking to you, and hopefully our paths will connect. And yeah, if you have any suggestions about how to get the word out, I mean, there are different, obviously in a good way, maybe there are different tribes in Christianity or American Christianity. And if there's any ideas you have for me to get the word out, it's just being an isolated, a pastor in New England for 25 years, you're somewhat isolated. You're not in the, in the certain circles. So
definitely.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, man. You have a good night.
Okay. Thanks.
You there, Brian?
See, dude, I'm going to stop the recording here.
Okay.